Hello, everyone. I'm back. It's Milos. May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, Mexican celebration of independence. Actually, yeah, I don't think it's Independence Day in Mexico. It was a difference, right? They talk about victory over French Empire. Yeah, this was not exactly the same. But Cinco de Mayo is very much celebrated. Told my Mexican friends, especially here in California when I was living. So I want to wish you all a happy Cinco de Mayo. One thing I want to tell you guys again, I've been frequently here, trying to look for the questions, and they're not coming in at the accelerated rate. So I have to pick and choose. There are very few. And then when I do the search, I see here that somehow I missed from Jimmy Hamza like 4 weeks ago. He asked a question, but I hope I'm not too late to answer this one. Here it is. Hello, Milos. I appreciate your knowledge. I plan of competing this summer, and we have to take long flights, leaving Wednesday and arriving Thursday morning, then competing on Saturday after weighing in on Friday. I work remote, so travel is unavoidable. How do you suggest avoiding water retention? I'm 6'1", 235, currently pretty lean, but I have 4 months to dial in, so I'm not late. I'm competing in Classic. I have competed twice before and was better before and after the show due to foolishly making last-minute changes trying to peak. This show, I will be ready a couple of weeks out, and I just plan on coasting in shredded and full condition, and I'm concerned about the flights. So, yeah, two things you mentioned: peaking, and then water retention due to the due to the flights. I know this is not good to do it very quickly. Okay, so not to miss out on the question. I used to travel a lot, right? We did European Grand Prix tours. If you guys remember, all of us, Kevin Veroni, Narcisse somebody, Chris Cormier, Lee Priest, and so on. And many times we had like 6 shows back to back to back, traveling, sometimes, of course, for a prolonged time. You said you were leaving on Wednesday, arriving Thursday, so it has to be, quite a big, long trip. How do I avoid water retention? Well, if you listen to Kevin Levrone, he was saying this quite often. He heard from flying attendants, stewardesses, they never hold water. Why? Because they keep moving. So don't stand still. So I was watching Kevin talking just about everyone. He would get up, parade, back and forth many times. Flying attendant had to sit him down. He believed that this would make a difference. So I'm not going to say much about that. Probably has a little bit of influence. But basically, when I travel, I suggest to my guys to be on lower carbs or no carbs whatsoever. If you're on protein, usually you don't retain water. Protein is diuretic itself. Now, the problem with the flights, you usually can't bring too much water, right? So you can overload. If you have a protein and drink loads of water, you would stay dry. But you arriving on Thursday morning, and the show is, 2 days later, you have 0 to worry about, right? Now, peaking that you said that you missed a couple of times. If you are normally watery type, and we have a lot of clients like this, there's somebody just holding water all the time, and then you have guys that don't hold water whatsoever, and then you analyze their diets and sodium intake and water intake. For whatever reason, for many years, bodybuilders were afraid of eating salt. First thing that I learned back in 80s, also coming from my father, salt is essential. Water is essential. 2 of the most important nutrients. Yeah, you heard that right, nutrients. They're not macronutrients, but they nourish your body. So being hydrated and having enough sodium is super important. So I was always in, very high sodium intake. It's so important for so many bodily functions, especially for high intensity bodybuilders that train like a maniacs, sweat a lot, have all these muscle contractions. So I have a tendency to give all of my clients a lot of sodium, a lot of salt, 10 grams plus. Yeah. So if you maintain this all the way through, you're going to see that with all that sodium, you're still not holding water at all. So if you just manipulate towards the end and drop slightly, you would see the difference. Water, drinking throughout, always, obviously. Peaking, if you're thinking carbohydrate loading, depletion loading, yeah, that's a little tricky thing. So you are planning just to coast in shredded and full condition. Well, you can be coasting in the full condition because you have to get full first, right? So if you're dieting and you're 2 weeks out already lean and ready, the chances that they're not really full, you're not full. So the fullness comes from this manipulation of carbohydrates and glycogen storage. So what I would suggest, because you said you're going to be 2 weeks out in a shredded and full condition, and you're not going to try anything crazy, that's the time that you can do the little tests. So whatever you plan to do on a Saturday show, right? Saturday, 3 weeks out, you do you're on your normal diet, you're losing body fat, and now you should be already lean. So you lost the body fat. So taking body fat in account in your diet is no longer there, no longer fat burning phases. Now just maintenance phase, and then maybe a loading phase. So you increase the carbohydrates for 1, 2, or 3 days, and see what happens. On that last carbohydrate, when you are filled up, try to manipulate the water a little bit, drop it down, and then see. And time it. If contest is Saturday 12 noon, then 3 weeks out, Saturday 12 noon, try to peak for the show. And this is basically either guessing, which happens to you twice already. It's foolishly making last minute changes. Last minute change has to be justified, right? So what you're trying to accomplish. So maybe you were not full enough, maybe you were not dry enough, and then you try to fix it. And usually you try to fix it at the last moment. It can work, but it can backfire. So I appreciate your idea of getting in shape well in advance. And then just as far as concern about traveling, Wednesday, that's 3 days out. It's super safe. I mean, I had a Samson Dauda, right? If you guys remember, he just competed in Arnold Classic, and then Monday he flew back to England. And Thursday, he flew back to, where was it? Boston show. Not even Thursday, Friday, day before the show. And we managed it, So it's very manageable. It just always be calm, collected, and make right decisions. Don't just last minute panic. And then before you do something, ask yourself several times, does this make sense? Okay, that's for that. As I'm on the subject, here is, would you mind discussing an optimal pre-show plan using diuretics? So we have 5 groups of diuretics. We have a loop diuretic, those common Lasix, furosemide, toracimide, bumetanide, Vumix, whatever it's called, in different countries, different. We have a thiazides group. Now, in Serbia and Europeans, we say Milos, not Milos. Thiazides. Maybe here you say thiazides. I don't know, but thiazides. Very common hydrochlorothiazide. We say hydrochlorothiazide. Then you have a potassium sparing ones. You have an osmotic that nobody uses, I used it back in the day, 96, 97, when there was diuretic testing, so there was there was a time to do it, and then there was carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. But these are all for medically manipulating water and electrolyte balance, for the patients. I'm not going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about diuretics for bodybuilders. So normally, what do we usually see? We usually see that people are using potassium sparing, aldactone, okay, and then loop, very aggressive, very fast, usually when they're spilled over. And then, many people use TSE groups, so diazide is one of the favorite, moduretic, so triamterene, hydrochlorothiazide or amiloride, mixed with it. Basically, if you ask most of the coaches, if everything goes well and you are in shape, they're not going to tell you to do anything dramatic. They're going to tell you to use very, mild, probably diazide, in sense of, 1/3 or 1/2, maybe, day before a show, once or a couple of times, and then day of the show, if needed, or moduretic. Traveling around the world, seeing many athletes, coaches, stuff like that, it's crazy stuff. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was in Dominican Republic, for example, over there, everybody was taking diuretics 1 month before the show. Every single day. And it was like, I heard from one second, like whatever coach at the time was suggesting, and, they were all doing it like, oh my God, absolutely, completely unnecessary and dangerous. So, why would you take, normally diazides, the hydrochlorothiazide alone, you can do this, or moduretic. It was very, very popular, especially like Australia and Europe. It's very similar. How much a touch, really a touch. I have some of the major pros that I was working with, and really, you're taking like 1/3 and 1/3, and sometimes you didn't even need to complete the third part of, so. Aldactone. Do I use aldactone? Yes, many times I would use aldactone potassium sparing with what idea? If I'm going to load them, carb load. Okay, so first I'm going to use aldactone, which is aldosterone blocker. So it accumulates potassium in the blood, right? And then with my carb loading principles, that I have a, targeted agent pushing everything from the blood into the cells, is going to now find the potassium, is going to drive potassium into the cells, and potassium drives the fluid in. So, I like to use this if I'm loading, a little bit of aldactone, try the last 3 days, if you want to know, or last 2 days. And any carbohydrates that you take should be fairly loaded with potassium, kalium. So you would be able to reach this high level of potassium intracellularly and bring the fluid in. And then last thing, when you need it, if needed, you would take something to flush it out. On that note, there's aldactazide or aldactazine in Europe, a little bit different. One in America is hydrochlorothiazide. What is WED? WED, I forgot now. It has to be spironolactone and hydrochlorothiazide. In Europe is spironolactone and Altazide. Yeah, it's a little bit stronger over there. But a lot of people are using aldactazide only. I remember back in the day, since Porter Cottrell days, Porter was always super ripped and super dry. That was his favorite, So I tested myself a few times, and it worked very well. So that would be about diuretics. Should you drink or you shouldn't drink? You see, if you're taking diuretics, you should drink, and especially if you're planning to take, what do you call it, loop diuretics, you should definitely drink. It even works better. Okay, let's, one more question. What's your opinion on high bar squat versus low bar squat versus hack squat or Zercher squat or any squat? Okay, so squat for me was always king of all leg exercises. Growing up in Serbia, Yugoslavia, we didn't have any machines. So the only thing that you can do is squat, and you can squat just so many ways. The first thing that I learned was that, if you want to target the quads, obviously you're going to have a high bar squat, right? You have to have that center of mass and, bar straight into the middle of your foot. So obviously, if you're putting it back and back and back on, your rear delts, not in your traps, you're going to have to bend forward. You're going to have to stick your hips out. And then, what you're going to do, you're going to have much more load on the hamstring glutes and the lower back. Why are you doing squats? Are you doing squats for quads? Well, if you're doing for quads, high bar squat is always superior to powerlifting type low bar squats. That is used by powerlifters. Why? Because more muscles are included, so therefore you can distribute that force and you can generate more power and break your record. But that's not the idea. If your idea is to load quad, which I think everybody is doing squats for anyway, then you should go high bar. Now, somebody is going to say, well, if you look at these biomechanics and you want to look at those moment arms and lever arms, right? So if you do from a high bar squat to the low bar, okay, what about if you go all the way to the front squat or a Zercher squat, right? So you're going to, distribute it differently and you can isolate your quads more. Well, on the front squat, definitely, yeah. Zercher squat, you can hit your glutes as well, but it's so uncomfortable. So your question is my opinion. Look, I built my legs strictly, initially on the squats, and then when I came to the United States, I could have a hack squat, which I think is the best exercise and best machine for legs. Hack squats, if it's angled properly, for me, it was way superior. So my whole workouts, for years was, of course, you pre-exhaust a little bit, warm up your quads with the leg extensions, go squats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plates, 6.5 when I was strongest. Immediately after that, whatever amount of weight I did on the freeway squats, I would go to the hack squats and then continue loading the bar even more. What was important for me? To feel the quad. If you do the freeway squats, if you are really honest, if I'm honest, do I really focus on the quads and I'm going to contract the quads and all that stuff? When you have 6 plates on your traps, you're not thinking of the quads. You just blast the weight, so you don't go super slow. You do explosive, right? You see a lot of times people in the videos nowadays on Instagram do super slow and all that stuff, which I commend them. But if you do the super slow free weight compound move, it's not the time to do it. You do it when you have some isolation, like a machine, and then you can really focus on that super slow contraction, making it tight, having zero momentum and stuff like that. It's not realistic on the squats. There's no way. Zercher squat, you can't even hold it for that long. Front squat also is very uncomfortable. They're good exercises, but come on, if you really want to Squat for bodybuilding is high bar squats. There's no question. Powerlifting, low bar, no question. Yeah, you're going to get more power and break the record. Number one exercise for me, forever and ever, hack squats, super slow. Now, what I mean by super slow, eccentrically, super slow concentrically. So for years I've been watching, and I was advising sometimes on Instagram and in phone conversations with some of the top pros. I see them do always super slow eccentric, but then explode concentric. The biggest nightmare you can ever expose your quads to is that super slow concentrics on the hack squats. Oh my God. You know, if you try it, you'll know it. And this is where I like to test everybody and challenge them. Super slow, eccentrically, pass parallel, zero momentum, contraction only. Contraction is lifting you up. You're not lifting yourself up, because if your mind is commanding, squat up, squat and go up, you're going to use everything. So you just contract the quads and, let that contraction lead you up. Go 3/4 of the way, so you're in that burn zone. And when you're feeling that kind of getting out of that burn zone, you realize, okay, you're going to be cheating, you're going to be relaxing at the top. Maintain that continuous tension, but not just continuous tension. You maintain that burn. And then if you're honest, make that burn more intense, unbearable. So when you start feeling this crazy lactic acid buildup and screaming, you're gonna know. You're gonna be sore for days. Your legs are gonna be blown up. And usually when you finish this kind of set, you can't even, standing, you try to squat down, you can't. Your legs are just trashed. I had a few days ago, I'm going to train him in 3 hours from now, Diogo Nunes, pro from Dubai, and we did the legs, and he even talked about this. So I made him do those super slow, but then also weight distribution on your feet. Okay, we were doing hack squats and V squats and pendulum squats and whatever. So once we plant the feet, okay, if you just look from the far away, you wouldn't know which muscle he's using. But we were using 5 reps. Even though your whole foot is on the platform, use the ball of the foot and quad. Then switch and same position, anything. Nobody looking from the outside would be able to know the difference when they're looking at. But now he is completely focusing on pushing from the heels and the hamstring glutes. I used to do this all the time. I would allocate, one rep this way, 1 rep that way, outer portion, inner portion, ball of the foot, heels. You can, pretty much stimulate specific fibers, every time. If you're in tune with your body, you can do that. So some people would say, hey, think about it. Like Bruce Lee would say in one of the movies, I'm sure you guys know, don't think, feel. It's my favorite scene. Feel. Real. Sometimes you think you feel something, right? I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of that, and you truly, honestly feel. So once you're in that kind of development, that you have that mind-muscle connection, you can feel every fiber contracting at any time. When you truly feel any, fiber, you know what I'm talking about. There was actually a trainer back in Spain, and he came to me and said, "Oh, Milos, I don't feel my quads." When he trains, he didn't feel the quads. I said, "Okay, I'll give you 15 seconds. You're gonna feel it." So what I do, of course, I get him in hack squat, fairly heavyweight, not really heavy, but I make him do, all the way down, and now slowly, 15 seconds. I want you to go 15 seconds up and not lock your knee. So when you do the super slow and he was in this vulnerable position, all of a sudden his knees start shaking and I said, okay, and he felt intense pain in the quad. So of course the quad is one of the easiest muscle to connect. So anyway, I hope I answered the questions. My opinion, high bar squat for bodybuilding, yes. Low bar squat for powerlifting, yes. Hack squat, the best thing you can possibly do for building the huge quads, bodybuilding type. Zercher squat, yeah, okay, fun. Ladies like to do it, and because you don't have to pick up super heavy weight. It's a little uncomfortable. It's good exercise. I mean, now I'm going to mention it. The front squats, right? For me, that was super hard to, hold the bar. So back in the day in Colosseum Gym, if you see some of the pictures with Hida, Sylvia, Johnny Jackson, and so on, we did those zombie squats. Actually, we call them Frankenstein, when you put it just on top and have a straight arms. This is the way easier for me to do it, and then your back would be, super straight, and then the moment arm on the quad, the knee joint would be longer. So the longer it is, the more affects the muscle of the joint there. So it's better. Like I said, every time when you lean, you're putting everything behind. And for example, Johnny Jackson, if you guys remember, he was a super powerful guy. I mean, squatting like 800 or something, right? But he didn't have legs to show, quads to show, because he was pushing everything from the back. So this is how I would say it, like Ronnie Coleman had a t-shirt, shut up and squat. So I'm going to finish with that, squat.